Hi, my name is Dan Zaccaro, and today I'm going to walk you through the main features of the Easy Behavior Tracker form and how to get started using it. Here's what the blank form looks like, but it will make more sense to see a completed version, so we can do that by clicking here. Here on our sample form, we can see the behavior rubric is on top, followed by a record of daily goals, and then the data collection piece below it. But let's start with the fun part and check out the Analysis tab. The first graph is the big picture and shows the daily averages for the student, along with a trend line to show the overall direction he is headed. The dotted line is a moving average, which averages the last 5 days of data collection. This is a more responsive way to look at sudden behavior changes, as you can see on the right side of the graph, where scores are increasing faster than before. The overall trend line is based on all data, so it wouldn't pick up on sudden changes like the moving average dotted line would. The bottom graph is similar, but this one looks at each behavior individually, up to 3 per form. The trend lines show the overall progress for each behavior, in this example, following directions and verbal behavior. At the very bottom, we have a table showing the average weekly growth for each behavior, as well as what the most recent scores have been, based on the average of the last 5 days. The box in the upper right is where you can set the long-term goals for the student. The baseline average and baseline date are filled in automatically, but you will need to set the long-term goal and goal date manually. Afterwards, you can click the Show Aim Line button to add the aim line to the graphs. This can be left on or off, depending on the view you prefer. Finally, the last 2 graphs show a comparison between days of the week and setting. For the weekday graph, you can leave this as overall, or you can click this drop-down box to isolate just one of the behaviors. The thick red lines show where the long-term goal is in comparison to the actual scores. So how do we get all these awesome graphs? Well, that's where the data entry piece comes in. To start collecting data, enter the student's name, teacher, and grade. Then decide which behaviors you would like to track. You can track 1, 2, or 3 behaviors. You can see here we are tracking 2 separate behaviors, following directions and verbal behavior. It is best to word behaviors positively, as in what we want students to do, instead of what not to do. But you can choose whatever behaviors you want. Next, we describe what we would expect for each rubric score. Again, you can write whatever you choose in here, but I have found that words like always, sometimes, and rarely are good milestones for the 2, 1, and 0 scores. Sometimes you can enter specific frequencies for each rubric score, but it all depends on what the behaviors look like. Finally, describe what settings you want to track. This can be class periods, specific times, or even locations like the bus. You can use all 10 slots or only use a few of them to focus in on problem settings. These will automatically copy across the entire form, so you shouldn't change them once data has been collected. However, you can add more settings later if you still have any of the 10 slots available. Once you have filled out the behavior rubric and chosen your settings, you are ready to start collecting baseline data. The first few days of tracking should be done without any rewards or additional instruction, so we can get a good sense of the student's starting point. Simply enter the date and then the scores for each setting or class. Once you have at least one day entered, the form will calculate baseline averages. The first 5 days are reserved for collecting baseline data, but you can jump ahead to the next part before that if you wish. If there are ever any missing scores for a period or behavior, like when a student is absent for a class, that's fine. The total scores will just take the average of what's available, so just enter whatever scores you have. The rest of the form is very similar. Just enter the date and the scores, and it will calculate the rest. The bottom right of each day will indicate whether the goal is met or not met. This uses the daily goal setting at the top of the page. Here, you decide what goal the student needs to get his reward. Typically, we want to start this a little higher than baseline and gradually increase it as the student improves throughout the year. You could keep this form completely electronic, but most people prefer to have a paper copy to use during the day. For that, we go to the Paper Form to Print tab. This automatically fills in the behavior rubric and classes or periods from the data entry page. Printing this allows teachers to quickly circle the score for each behavior so they can be entered online later. By default, it displays numbers 2, 1, 0. But for younger students, you can change this drop-down to have it show smiley faces instead. One great thing about Google Sheets is that we can give access to whoever we wish. So you can give parents view-only access so they can see day to day how a student is doing and maybe provide insight on any positive or negative trends. And that's everything. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at helixforms@gmail.com. And to find more forms like this, go to my store page at tinyurl.com/helixforms.